I'm late. So now we're here. We're all together now. So good. Okay. So we'll make up for the lost time. So tell me, we're going to now talk about the mind today, aren't we? Is that the plan?
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Okay. So last week we talked about karma, didn't we?
Yes, we talked about purifying karma.
Okay, good. Fantastic. So everybody, I'm happy to see you all. Glad we're all here together, all of us, everybody. So we just set ourselves in the right direction, thinking, this little prayer here expresses two thoughts. The first one is our reliance on the Buddha. If we're already Buddhists, we reiterate that. Oh, this one, okay. Maybe the other one. Have you got the other one? Sangye Chodang. Have you got Sangye Chodang, Sangye Chodang, the one, the refuge and bodhicitta? That's the best one to have.
Yes, give me just a second, Venerable.
Sure. Okay. So the first two lines are expressing our reliance on the Buddha. The second two lines are stating our motivation. This bodhicitta motivation is very long term. So we think we're going to do this activity of listening together, thinking, analyzing these ideas, so that long term we can finally use these tools to develop our amazing potential to be a benefit to others. I can just sing it, don't worry. So that's those words I said then. Have those in your mind as I sing it. It's okay, Rebecca. Okay, don't worry. So just think we rely on the Buddha. We take refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and in order to benefit all sentient beings, we listen to these teachings, and we think those thoughts. Sangye Chodam Sangye Chodam La Janto Baru Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chonyan Gi Personam Ki Dora Penche Sangye Drupasho. Take refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and for the sake of all sentient beings, we listen to these teachings, so we can lead them all to enlightenment. That's the plan. That's our view. That's our goal. Okay. Okay. So the mind, for the Buddha, the mind's the point, everything comes down to the mind. And I think in modern psychology and modern neuroscience, that's kind of a surprise. We're very good at the hard sciences in our culture. We know all the universe, the physical world intimately, profoundly. We know the behavior of miniature ants. We're so good at the physical. We're brilliant at the physical because our machines don't know how to look at the mental. And that's the very simple, radical difference of Buddha's teachings, Of course, His Holiness over the last 30, 40 years having these amazing conversations with all the scientists, bringing these two seemingly very opposite views together. And that's what's so encouraging, because it's only really now, that the people in our culture, all these genius scientists and people, are actually seeing the amazing system that's been existing for India in several thousand years. It's quite an eye-opener for us, I think. So it's really marvelous. So here we're not going to talk about the physical world. I don't know anything about it anyway. I don't know much about the Buddhist either, but I'll tell you what I do know. So we'll discuss the mind, because the mind is everything for the Buddha. Everything comes from the mind, finally. And to really understand Buddhism properly, if we want to understand the big picture, we really want to understand what meditation is. We really want to understand what shamatha is. We really want to understand karma. We really want to understand reincarnation. Everything, it comes down to understanding the mind. So, of course, all of the Buddhist views, Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist metaphysics, Buddhist psychology, Buddhist epistemology, all of it is rooted in the mind. So we don't know what he means by the mind, then it's just superstition. I mean, if you hear about reincarnation and you're really firmly convinced there's only a brain, then you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know where to go. You don't know what to do with that. It's just a meaningless load of rubbish, So we've got to kind of look at what he means by the mind. And then we have to take that as our working hypothesis. Otherwise, how can you look into it? You can't just be stubborn about it. So he's not arguing we've got a brain. Of course we've got a brain. It's our expertise in the modern world. But, these great yogis from centuries ago, you ask them about their mind and they've mapped the mind. Centuries ago, they mapped the mind. It was His Holiness who said, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. And where they looked was not in the brain, was not in the external world, was in the actual own personal cognitive process itself. So it's quite unique to the Buddha, this approach, So what Buddha's talking about? What Buddha's talking about is this internal subjective cognitive process. You can't touch it, taste it, smell it. And this is where it gets really abstract for us. We know if we're materialists, which is the philosophy that prevails in our culture, We hear about Christians who say a soul. We hear about the Muslims who talk about the same thing. We hear about the Hindus talking about an Atman, something that's not mind, not body. And then we just go, no, we're only just talking about the body. Well, Buddha doesn't discuss those either. He doesn't posit an Atman, a soul, an essence, a self. He doesn't discuss those. He discusses the mind. That's his expertise. So the mind necessarily is not physical. So of course you can't see it, because you can't see it and taste it and touch it. We have to posit the possibility first. You're only going to know your mind directly when you're really an advanced practitioner, you know. So we're made of body and we're made of mind. So it's interesting in the Vajrayana model. I find it very helpful. It's more advanced teachings, but in the Vajrayana system, they describe, you know, and this is described in the death process. It's really very helpful. When you die, or when we go through these different stages of consciousness. We've got gross consciousness, which is referring to our sensory consciousness. And to be absolutely precise, sensory consciousness is not the eyeball, is not the eardrum, it's not the nerves. Sensory consciousness, because Buddha would say consciousness is not physical, and consciousness and mind are virtually synonymous. That your consciousness, your mind, your eye consciousness is that part of your mind that functions through the medium of the eyeball. Then the ear consciousness is that part of your consciousness that functions through the medium of the bits and pieces there, you know. So the five sensory consciousnesses, they're the gross level. So when they're ceased, when you stop breathing at death, that's when the gross consciousness has ceased. But the Buddha would say there's more consciousness there. There's now what they call subtle consciousness, which is your mental, all your thoughts and your mental consciousness is subtle. And this is the mind that dreams. This is the mind that's in a coma. This is your subtle consciousness, you know. Then you've got even very subtle or extremely subtle. This is described in the Vajrayana. I just find it useful to talk about it here. You don't learn that in the sutra teachings. So we've got these subtle levels of mind. And you can certainly say, this is again the Vajrayana, but even in the sutra teachings, when you get shamatha, concentration, when you've accomplished this amazing state of subtle concentration, these Hindus, Indians before the Buddha invented this technique, then you've accessed a subtle, and they mightn't talk about it in the same way as this technical term in Vajrayana, but you've certainly accessed a subtler level of your mind. When you see a person who's fully developed this concentration, they will look like they were dead. There'll be no grosser level of function, no grosser consciousness at all, no brain activity. So the view of mind in Buddhism is very, very different. But in general, we're so used to in spiritual teachings thinking of something that isn't physical. That's called a soul or a spirit. Buddha doesn't use those words at all. He just uses the word mind. We've got the grosser levels and these subtler levels. And the function of mind is to cognize. That's it, you know. So when you study the mind in the Tibetan Buddhist monastic university system, which is the text that we use, I'm sure Venerable Tendron has taught this to you in Florida. You've studied the text called Lorig, Mind and Awareness. And it's been around for several thousand, a couple of thousand years. And it's the presentation, one presentation of the way the mind functions in two ways. And this is so super interesting. And we really like to study it. It's super, super interesting. We've got sensory, the first way that you study the mind is the epistemological model of the mind, which is the way it functions. And this is super fascinating. And of course, we're not discussing the brain. We're discussing this actual subjective cognitive process itself. And this is super fascinating how it works. I think Western scientists will be utterly fascinated to study it. But of course, they have to posit the possibility that they're not discussing the physical brain. It's very fascinating. So in this process of the mind, the way the mind functions, we've got these two ways that our mind, different ways of presenting it, but here, particularly related to our own lives, and it's really very powerful to learn this. We've got like I just said, we've got sensory consciousness, but we've also got mental consciousness. So this is now this example I always like to use you'll see very clearly how they're completely different. But we don't think like this in our culture, you know. So the sensory consciousnesses are like the eye, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tactile, and this one, the tongue. 5 of them, isn't it? So the fact is, and they function through the body, don't they? The body. So as Lama Yeshe says, we make the body the boss, you know. It's really inappropriate. In other words, we give way much more power to the body, to our sensory experiences than they in fact have. This is a major fascinating point, and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about, and how this confusion we have about the parts of our mind and what is cognizing what, how this really leads us up garden paths. It really gets us completely locked into samsara, you know. So I was the same example. If I hear that as sound, let's say it's a trumpet, and I go, wow, Miles Davis. I'll use example because I'm a fan of Miles Davis, a jazz musician. So what is my ear consciousness cognizing? Precisely no more and no less than mere sound. My ear consciousness does not have the capability of saying Miles Davis, not possible. So, and not saying wow, trumpet, all the rest, you know. So if my ear consciousness is not capable of cognizing Miles Davis, cognizing it as a trumpet, cognizing beautiful, ugly, jazz, whatever you like, or the name of the tune or whatever, if my ear consciousness is not capable of that, then it's obvious the question we have to ask, which part of my mind is cognizing, wow, Miles Davis, blah, blah. Well, honeys, that's our mental consciousness. That's our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and all that whole spectrum of basically conceptual stories, opinions. We have millions of them. This is the level of our mental consciousness, and that's a very gross level. We have much subtler levels of mental consciousness that we never access, and that's only when we get single point of concentration can we access them in meditation. And we need to access those subtle levels of consciousness, subtle levels of mental consciousness in order to really see reality, in order to cut the root of all the rubbish and get all the realizations. You know, we live at the very gross level of our mind, according to the Buddha's view. So mental consciousness, that's what, as Lama Zopa says, that's where the workshop is. So what are the contents of that? Well, this is now the psychological model of the mind, the contents of the mind. And there are, in fact, thousands of thoughts in there. So this level of our mind, as I said, functions at 2 levels, but we only ever access the grosser level, which is literally conceptuality. So if we say concepts, we will point up here, or you have concepts, you know, that sounds very rational, doesn't it? But when we say we have emotions, we point here. But for the Buddha, for this view of the mind, is very different. All of this, emotional or 1 + 1 is 2, or clever conceptual thoughts, or anger or love or compassion, they're all a function of conceptuality. So we need to understand that if we want to understand Buddha's view of the mind. Otherwise, it's just confusion, you know. But it's a surprise to us. If you see a person shouting and yelling, angry, spit coming out their mouth, eyes wide in horror, irrational words coming out of their mouth, and you say that anger is a concept, you'll laugh, you know. As far as we're concerned, anger is a powerful emotion, and the body's shaking, and you know, you look what you do on the basis of it. So this is where we have to distinguish between mind and body. This has to be the job. It has to do this in the Buddhist view. You have to distinguish. Otherwise, it's all just nonsense. Mind is not in its nature physical. It is not a function of the brain. I always quote this when I worked on Lama Zopa's book about how to help at the time of death. It's a brilliant book. I really encourage you to get it, and we use it for teachings at some point. It's called How to Face Death Without Fear. And in there, at the same time I was working on that book, I was reading a book by an American medical journalist called Nick Teresi, and it's called The Undead. It's not about zombies, okay? It's about it's this Nick Teresi. He's a medical journalist in the States, and has all his findings as a result of the business of taking organs and people giving their organs, and it's an amazing business. I mean, it's very fascinating. He's done all this research, and he's saying this real complicated and quite conflicting and quite difficult now, because people have all these now getting very confused as a result of taking people's organs. They're now getting very confused about when death does occur, and they're really starting to question their assumptions. And that's brilliant, because it's so clear from the Buddhist point of view that when you've stopped breathing, you're not dead yet. But that's the assumption in the West. But now, I mean, for example, in cultures all over the world, we know perfectly well, there are so many reports of people who, quote unquote, come back to life. And we can't work it out with neuroscience. It doesn't make sense to us. It's so weird. People in coffins, even in Victorian times, apparently, you could have a little bell in your coffin so you can ring it in case you didn't die. So it's not uncommon. Can you imagine the horror if you're buried alive? I mean, can you imagine the nightmare of waking up in a coffin and you're not dead? It's so not uncommon, this. So this is really confusing people. And so I remember there's one fellow, and he had a whole chapter, this man also. He had a whole chapter on people who have what they call out-of-body experiences while they were on the operating table and under anesthetic, unconscious. But the number of reports, of course, the medical profession just go, oh, don't be ridiculous, not possible, blah, blah, blah. But he quoted one particular woman who had to have such a radical procedure that they had to stop all her organs working. And from their point of view, there was no way in the world she'd be conscious. Could she be conscious? But she reported, he joked about it, she reported the most vivid out-of-body experience. So technically, you don't leave your body. It's your mental consciousness, your subtle consciousness, which is dreams. That's why so many people in dreams can leave their bodies, the West calls it astral traveling. You don't leave your body, but your subtle mind is capable of what they call clairvoyance. And that right now is in the way. We can't see because our mind is so gross. But when you're asleep, or when people in dreams, or people can often do that, your mental consciousness, your subtle mental consciousness, which doesn't depend upon the brain, can see people in Australia, it feels like you're floating above your body, but you're not leaving your body at all. But your mental consciousness is capable of that. So many stories. This fits completely with the Buddhist view, So there was this report even. Anyway, never mind that, but this doctor was quoted as saying in this business, I can say now with certainty, consciousness is not a function of the brain. I don't know what it is, but at least I can say that. And this is all these amazing conferences that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is having with all the best scientists on the planet. And the people are starting to really seriously question assumptions now, which is fantastic. It's amazing. Because the Buddhist view is very clear. You're not dead until the mind leaves the body, which can be 3 days, your subtle mind, it can be 3 days after you stop breathing. So in this book of images, there's all these chapters on what you do when your loved one dies, in home, at the hospital, or if they give their organs. And it's very interesting, this discussion, because until your mind has left, but the trouble is they keep you breathing and keep your heart beating from the second you stop breathing, but your mental consciousness is there. And then you're on the operating table, you're still alive, basically. You're not dead yet, It's very interesting indeed. Anyway, mind is not physical. And so what I'm getting at now is there are 2 ways in which our mental consciousness functions. The grosser level, which is the only level we function at, is conceptuality, including all our brilliant intellectual thoughts, including all our thoughts about math, thoughts about music, all our clever thoughts, as well as our emotional thoughts. And this is a crucial point to understand. So in Buddha's analysis of the mind, when he states, he lists, in this text that you studied, Lorig, he only lists about 51 of these states of mind. There are thousands, but the particular ones he lists are these, especially the ones that are emotional, have an emotional component. So the way I put it is this. If you're talking about 1 + 1 is 2 and intellectual, IT concepts and musical theory concepts, they're not emotional, are they? They're just in your head and there's no body involved. You're not shaking with bliss or screaming and yelling when you say about 1 + 1 is 2, because it's just pure concepts. But the other concepts we have, anger, love, compassion, good or bad ones. This is the point. Why they're so physically emotional. This is the simple point, because our body and our mind are inextricably linked, powerfully connected. And the way they describe it, which is similar to the Tibetan medical system, this is the Vajrayana model again, we've got these 72,000 subtle channels in our subtle physical energy, just like the Tibetan medical, just like the Chinese system talks, but maybe the Hindus as well. So then you've got, and our states of mind are going all through those channels, and they're linked to these different subtle wind energies. So when let's say you're having panic attacks, the Tibetan Buddhist, the Tibetan medical system should feel your pulses, and she'll feel the imbalance of these wind energies, really extreme imbalance, which is physical, subtle physical, and it's connected to your attachment mind, and your attachment's berserk. That's why you have panic attacks. So the mind and body are super affected. They are connected, So when you have these particular states of mind that we call emotions, we only notice them. You think about this. We only notice them when the body is involved. That's why we call them emotions. You only notice you're angry when you're shouting, so the body's shaking. So the body and the mind are interconnected. When the mind is really raging, then it's affecting all the physical body, and the physical body rages. But the body isn't anger. The mind is anger. And why does your body get involved? Because those states of mind are very, very, very habitual. I had anger when I was a little girl. My mother didn't need to teach me. It was instinctive because I brought it with me from the past. And so when you're really strong conceptual stories, really strong conceptual story called anger is connected to that physical part of you. So your body shakes and your body yells. Look at strong attachment. Look at what it does to the body, The body doesn't experience attachment. The body doesn't experience anger, but the mind, habitual emotional states that are very habitual, very deeply ingrained in us, very instinctive, they impact upon the body and make the body shake. So they're the emotional states of mind, including love and compassion. Tears will come, but mind, compassion is the mind. And it's based, compassion, when it's very emotional, is a habitual, and there's this empathy, the feeling of someone's pain. But the bare bones of what compassion is a conceptual story, a concept. May you not suffer. But because you've got it for so long and so often, it's now totally habitual, totally instinctive, and even your body's involved. That's with attachment, anger, and all of them. So they're the ones we notice. And we only notice them when the body is affected. And so therefore we're so addicted to our physical experiences. So we think attachment is physical. No, it's not. I mean, look at the body. When the strong, I'm trying to be too gross here, but look at strong sexual attachment. Look at the body, the experience of the body. Attachment is not a function of the body, but because attachment is so intense, so powerful, so ingrained in the mind, and that it affects all the parts of the body and does all kinds of extraordinary things to the body. Look what you've got when you've got sexual attachment. It completely feels like a physical experience to us, doesn't it? And the other component there, and we'll discuss this, is that you've got the various negative states of mind, the neurotic, deluded, negative ones. You've got the virtuous ones, love, compassion. Then you have the mechanics of the mind. And they're neither negative nor positive, but they're crucial, like concentration, good memory, intention, attention, discrimination, many of these. And among that category, you've got one called feeling. And you only ever have a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or a neutral feeling. So pleasant feeling is another word for happiness. Happiness is not an event. Happiness is not the cake. Happiness is not the boy's body. Happiness is not physical. Happiness is a state of mind, and it's neither negative nor positive. But because happiness comes along with attachment, comes along all immediately together like one big experience, we can't discriminate between them. We don't know the difference. In other words, we don't really notice what's going on in our mind most of the time. The Buddhist analysis is so clear, so precise, so individual, so exact. Even in our terms in psychology, we talk about very general, broad stroke kind of, general problems. But the Buddhist one is very precise. It's each thought, every second, is love, kindness, generosity, intention, attention. There's so many working together in this brilliant kind of mechanism of our mind, so we need to learn to become super intimate at every second, every moment, every thought, everything, as we get more advanced. It's very precise, I tell you. So when we understand the function of the different parts of the mind, we can start to make sense of our lives, otherwise we're just confused. So mental consciousness, that's where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says. That's what we have to learn to become familiar with, because that's, you know, when I just hear that sound, and then instantaneously, quicker than Google, this is really true, my mental consciousness is then accessed. First, my ear hears it. Then the millisecond later, then my mental consciousness, where all my thoughts are stored, all my memories are stored, all my opinions are stored, out come the words, wow, Miles Davis. That's conceptual. That's concepts. And the Buddha's saying, in this mental consciousness, at the level we function at, all these conceptual stories, they are all conceptual stories. And he divides them into some that are nonsense, that have no basis in reality, some that are valid, that have a basis in reality, and then the mechanics of it. I call them mechanics. So we have to learn to distinguish all these bits in this big soup of emotion of ours. You know, it's an incredibly subtle job to do, very intricate, and you can't begin to do it until you've really got concentration. But we go slowly. We've got to start where we are, you know. So our key job as a Buddhist is to distinguish between the neurotic, deluded, ridiculous, nonsense states of mind and the valid, virtuous, positive, appropriate states of mind. That's the bottom line of being a Buddhist. And that's a really tough job. That's why we've got to control our body and speech first and abide by the laws of karma and purify our karma. That's got to happen first. Control the serpents of your mind. Then you can start to become your own therapist, like Robina said, you know. So, okay, that means you have to study the model of the mind. You know, we all know the word anger. We all know the word love, but we all got our own definitions. You know, we need Buddhas here. So they're all conceptual states of mind. Some are negative, disturbing, neurotic, deluded, misconceptions. Some are valid, reasonable conceptions. The negative, neurotic, deluded ones are the source of our suffering, and the positive, virtuous, appropriate ones are the cause of our happiness. Pretty simple. The negative ones cause us to do things that harm others, which causes our future suffering and makes us miserable now. And the positive ones cause us to be happy now and make us do valid, appropriate, useful things to others. So this is our job, to distinguish between these two lots, you know. This is the essential job of a Buddhist. And to lessen the neurotic ones and grow the good ones. That's the bottom line, you know. So, okay, all the negative ones, you know, the main emphasis in the beginning is on the negative ones. You've got to start to look at what the problems are, you know. So there's 70, Buddha talks about 84,000 of these. It sounds hilarious, doesn't it? But, you know, but they're all rooted in the 3 root delusions, the 3 toxic emotions, the 3 poisons, as they're called. And and all those 84,000 subsume to these 3. It's very simple and seems like rather corny and silly for us. Oh, 3, so cute: attachment, anger, you know, how boring we think. You go to your therapist, I've got a bit of anger today. She'll tell you to shut up, you know, it's too boring. But these are the fundamental states of mind. And we can understand attachment and aversion, the second and the third. If we can begin to comprehend these 2 and see them in our mind daily, we will have a profound understanding of our own mind. There's no question. So they're called the 3 poisons, 3 toxic emotions. The root one is called ignorance, simply called ignorance, known colloquially as ego grasping when it's related to ourself. So what it is this primordial, deeply held, primordial misconception, deep in the bones of our being, deeply ancient, deeply habitual, so subtle we don't even label it. It's just at the level of a deep feeling, a deep assumption. And it assumes the presence of a solid, real, independent, definite me. It's the root problem, the root lie, the root misconception. Then on the basis of this, the 2 other ones, the main one is attachment. And that's effectively, in the 4 Noble Truths of the Buddha, effectively, that is the main cause of our suffering. Sounds such a shock, doesn't it? Attachment, I mean, the way we use that word in our culture, we conflate it with love and kindness, and it's okay. We're allowed to have whatever definition we like. But if we want to understand Buddhism, we better know what his definition is. And as far as he's concerned, it's a deeply neurotic state of mind, deeply disturbing. It's multifaceted. We come into this life programmed with it. The energy of it first, the deepest energy of it is dissatisfaction. As Lama Zopa says, that's the main suffering in the Western world. And that dissatisfaction, so profound, we call it in our culture self-loathing. Because dissatisfaction is, I don't have enough. It isn't enough. But the real one is, I'm not enough. It's the worst disease. And we believe it as an absolute truth. And it's the source of such despair. You know, it's incredible. But in general, it's I haven't got enough. Whatever you get, not enough. How much you achieve, not enough. How much food you eat, not enough. How much thing you get, not enough. How much pretty you look, not enough. How much money you have, not enough. How much your boyfriend tells you he loves you, not enough. It's just this default assumption, it's not enough. And it's called dissatisfaction. And it sounds so simple, but it can be at profound levels. And it's the result of practicing attachment in the past. So it's the most energetic level of attachment. So obviously, because you're dissatisfied, then you think there's something you've got to find that'll fill up the gaping hole. That's its main job in relation to the 5 sense objects. You're looking for something out there such that when you have contact with it, it'll fill up the hole. That's called eating, drinking, having sex, listening to music, touching things, smelling things, having possessions. This is the objects of the universe, isn't it? And we have attachment for them. And then the ones we don't like, okay, forget that. But so the attachment is this constant emotional hunger to get something that'll fill up the gaping hole. This is a fairly gross level of it. And it's always dissatisfied. Then, then it's the next level, when it gets that object, then its main job is it exaggerates the deliciousness of the object. And then we believe that story. I mean, we can see it with a cake. You can see it for sure with a boyfriend and the whole life with the boyfriend. We make up this attachment makes up this elaborate story. The whole story is not a lie. You can have a boyfriend. You might be together for 20 years. You will have children. You will have a nice house. That's not a lie. But attachment exaggerates it all. Exaggerates the power of the boyfriend to make you happy. Exaggerates his deliciousness. Exaggerates the deliciousness of the children. Exaggerates the deliciousness of the house. It overlays on top of everything qualities that just aren't there. But we don't think they are made up. We think they're real. Attachment. And then you get the object, you then possess it. So that's all a function of attachment, is dissatisfaction, emotional hunger, hankering, manipulating, controlling, exaggerating, possessing. That's attachment. And it pervades through all the things we do so integratedly that we don't give it a separate identity. We can't see it because we just assume it's normal behavior, you know. So attachment also works at a subtler level. You don't learn much about that in the very beginning, but as we get more advanced, especially when we get to the Bodhisattva path, we're going to learn about attachment at a much subtler level, a much more pervasive level. And that's really attachment to, one of those attachments is very profound. That's attachment to how we're seen and treated by others. This is the most pervasive, most subtle, most intense suffering. And it's deep in our bones. And we really can't see it until we're quite advanced because it's just so normal. The deepest attachment to how we're seen by others, we're craving constantly we have, is to be seen in a good light, which causes us to constantly adjust our words, adjust our behavior, adjust what we do, because we're desperate to be approved of. We're desperate to be liked. So always checking outside, is what I'm doing, someone else, are they approving of it? And we adjust it accordingly. This is why we all go mad, you know. We don't notice it. We just don't notice it. We think it's normal behavior. It's the worst attachment of all. They say it's the last attachment to go. They say the yogis in the mountains who've given up everything are still thinking about what the people in the village are thinking about them. That's this one. It's always this voice inside our head. Always reference, we're always talking to other people, seeing what they think. Always if we're lonely, it's because we haven't got a person to talk to, because we don't think we're valid until someone else says we're a nice person. This is the deepest attachment. But at the very first stages of practice, we look into the attachment to the objects, you know, at least try and calm down our senses, not to go berserk. So it's multifaceted, this attachment, you know. Lama Yeshe says, I can tell you about it for a whole year. You'll never begin to understand it, you know. But another way of putting it, another primordial way, is the most simple, basic level of it, the most primordial level, is this constant emotional hunger, this kind of frantic hunger to get only the nice things. And it can't stand anything that isn't that. So that gives rise to the third of these three poisons, which is simply called aversion. So the millisecond attachment doesn't get what it wants or get what it doesn't want. Aversion arises. So we're going between these two 1,000 times a day. And they're not necessarily really violent extremes, but we just don't pay attention. So the violent level of aversion, the volatile one, is called anger. You see a person shouting and yelling. The milder levels of aversion, thwarted attachment, are irritation, annoyance, frustrated, upset. We all have that all the time. That's aversion. It's a mild level of anger. And what it is the response because your attachment, your emotional hunger, isn't getting what it wants. This sounds very brutal, but this is the workings of these states of mind, and they're there all the time. And because they're fairly mild level, and we've got our love and our compassion and our kindness on top, we just don't notice until they're violent. You know, so interesting. So aversion is multifaceted. The obvious volatile level is anger, shout and yell. The mild aversions are irritation, annoyance, upset, frustrated. But the subtler levels are what we call depression. And because all these states of mind build up, the Buddhist view is like one Lama said, it's like we're shooting a movie all day. Anything we've ever seen or heard or tasted or touched or smelled since the beginning of time is stored in our memory as images, as memories. And then we have the qualitative version when we call them ugly, beautiful, and all the other business. They're all stored in our mind. So if you're getting frustrated every second, it builds up. And then one day, the straw that breaks the camel's back, you'll kill your husband. And you'll be surprised. Or you'll wake up in bed one morning inert because you're profoundly depressed. Because we haven't paid attention until it's too late. This is I swear to you, this is our major problem in the West. If we began to have awareness of what the hell is going on in our mind before it vomits out your mouth, before you're inert in bed from depression, we wouldn't be having problems. We could navigate our lives. This is literally the truth. But we don't pay attention until it's violent. We don't pay attention until the wheels fall off. That's the problem. So this is what Buddha's amazing expertise is, its ability to see your mind clearly and practice a little bit and get a bit of concentration so you start to see it before it becomes dramatic. And then in the next level of practice, you start to see your thoughts, then you can hear them, and then you begin to argue with them. This is amazing. This is real daily practice. But we don't know how to do that. And then we go mad because we're having profound despair, depression, anxiety. We've never dealt with it, and we just don't know where to turn. So we think, go get a pill, do something because we're desperate, That's how much we suffer in our culture. We leave it until it's too late. Why? Because we don't pay attention to our mind. It's not part of our culture. These days, a little bit's coming, but still not really, I promise, not really. We're obsessed with the outside world because that's where we think happiness is. That's where we think suffering is. So we don't bother looking inside until it's too late, until we can't stand it. Whereas if you since you're little, you were given tools to help you hear your thoughts and change them, you'd be a sane, civilized, stable human being who, when the dramas do happen, you can handle them. So it shows out mental suffering in the West is unbelievable because we don't know how to handle our mind. We don't have a proper analysis with respect to us. So if we can understand attachment and aversion, I tell you, we'll have such a profound understanding of ourselves because we're going between these two all the time. It's not joking. All the time, to one degree or another. And the one that runs everything is attachment. The assumption, as I said, a deep assumption that I only get the nice things, which of course means what I want. Nice things according to me. And in other words, attachment Just can't stand problems. It can't stand even a loud noise in the day. You get annoyed, you know. You drop a cup while you're washing the dishes, you get annoyed. The hubby slurps his tea, you get annoyed. The kid doesn't answer properly, you get annoyed. The cat shits in the wrong place, you get annoyed. Think about these simple baby examples. We just think that's normal life. No, it is normal life because but your mind's uncontrolled. If you had control over your attachment and aversion, they wouldn't worry you. This is like a miracle for us. But we leave it till too late. We just follow our feelings. We just follow our feelings like idiots because we don't even understand why we're having it. Or we think it's normal. Or we think I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed to be depressed. I'm allowed to be jealous. We talk like that. It's unbearable. It's so much suffering. We don't know how to own what's inside us. We blame mummy, or we blame daddy, or we blame the genes or the DNA or the weather or the politics. That's our analysis in the West with respect to us. That's our natural analysis. So we're always looking at the outside to try and fix the outside. That's what we do. Buddha's view is different. He says, sure, try and change the outside world. No problem. If you can change it, honey, please change it. But what, honey, child, if you can't? That's when the work starts. That's Buddha's expertise. Don't call it religion. It's practical. It's the method to get happy. God's sake. It's unbelievable, you know. And that's what I found so moving always about my friends in prison. They don't have the luxury of changing their outside world. These shitty places they live in, they don't have a key to get out. Garbage, you know, I mean, plenty of psychopaths in the outside world. You don't need to be a prisoner to be a psychopath, but there are quite a few in prison. And you've got no choice over where you live. You've got no choice who your roommate is. You've got no choice about anything. But so you know you can't change anything. Your back's against the wall. So this is where my friends in prison that I've known for like 25 years are really powerful Buddhist practitioners because they know they can only change their mind. They know that's their only option. But we are kind of ironically believe we can change anything and then wonder why we suffer so badly because half the time we can't. We just live in misery, blaming everybody. We live in, I mean, for me, it's so shocking when I look at how we live in terrible relationships, how we live in lousy jobs, feeling hopeless, can't change my job, I can't change, because we don't even know we have the choice to change our job, not to mention know we can change our mind. We're just like lemmings, you know. It's very, very sad how we suffer. And then we defend. I'm allowed, if I've got a crummy husband, but I'm allowed to be angry. This is exactly how we talk. It's very fascinating. I'm allowed to be jealous. Look what he does to me. He is cheating on you. No argument. That's when he's talked about karma. We know why he's cheating. But now it's up to me to do something about it. And this, in the end, I tell you, it's very fascinating. If we understand attachment and aversion, understand our role with our mind, we begin to realize we're in charge. There's, in the end, any situation, this is so brutal and seems so mean. There are only ever two options. Ever. Think about it. Job, relationship, everything. There's two options. You can leave it. If you can't handle it, leave. But if you can't leave or decide not to leave, your other option is to change your mind. So you change the environment or you change your mind. That's it. That's options. That's life. So then our trouble is we become paralyzed. We don't think we have any choices. You know, you can be living in a lousy job for 25 years and hate the job and hate the boss and hate the colleagues, getting more depressed by the minute. But it never occurs that you could leave the job, change your job, or change your mind. We don't even know we can do either. So we stay like, talk about being in prison. That's the worst prison. At least my friends in prison know they can't change the job. So then they've got one choice, change their mind. That's it. That's what's powerful. So this view, I can change my mind, comes when you begin to posit this view that your mind is your thoughts and that they're your thoughts and that you can learn to reconfigure them. Rather than feeling I didn't ask to get born, it's not my fault, and that the angry thoughts are a product of your bad boyfriend. That's what we believe as a truth. Look at the behavior of the world. Of course we believe the outside world is the cause of our happiness and suffering. It's so clear, so crystal clear. And this doesn't mean There isn't suffering. I mean, there's unbearable suffering in the world. Look what people do to each other. It's unbelievable pain. There is no doubt. That's why always as examples I use of my friends in prison. And one in particular, one woman, I didn't meet her till she came out of prison. Her name is Sunny, and she's quite well known in the world. In Florida, 40 years ago, more, she was hitching with a husband. She's a hippie in the 70s, and their kids. And they got picked up by two guys. This is roughly the story. And then they got stopped by the police. And the two guys killed the police and blamed the hippies, Sunny and her husband. So they put her on death row. I mean, look how you feel when your kid doesn't do what you want. Look what you feel when your wife accuses you. Look what you feel when the boss says something mean. We go mad. We can't handle it. It's so painful. So can you just imagine? That's why it's good to use extreme examples. This hippie, for God's sake. Nobody believed. The judge, the jury, the police, the people in the prison. And she lived in this nightmare of hell for years. 17 years in prison, 12 years on death row. Husband executed. She went to the execution and his head burst into flames. Excuse me, if that's not suffering, I don't know what is, you know. But she had this amazing ability. This woman is amazing. She's a little old lady now, you know. You just think she's this nice, cute little old lady. You'd never know this nightmare of years of suffering that she's had. There's no evidence of it because she worked on her mind. She's amazing. She's not a Buddhist. She did yoga and stuff, you know. She's a little Jewish hippie. But she had this astonishing, and the way I put it, this incredible ability. She knew she could, as she said, I knew I had a choice. She said, at some point, I mean, even when she got into prison, at least her children were given to her parents. She was so happy that they had a wonderful home. The parents died in a car accident. She lost her children, lost her parents. Husband was burned to death in his execution. I mean, you can't imagine, one after another is nightmare. And she said, at some point, I realized I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. Or she said to me, I knew I had a choice. I could change my thoughts. This is so advanced. I mean, look at our lives. Nobody has that level of suffering most of the time. Look at the little bits of suffering we have, which is basically attachment not getting what it wants. Look how we don't even think that we could change our mind. It doesn't even occur to us as an option. This is what's utterly fascinating. But she came to this realization. She'd be many years in solitary with a Bible. That was it. I mean, talk about cruel, you know. Husband executed, parents killed in a car accident, lost her children, accused of murdering two policemen. You can't believe one after the other, you know. It's almost like it's such a classic story. But she knew, she said, they can't take my mind from me. So I decided, she said, I am not a prisoner. I am a monk. I am not in a cave. I'm not in a cell. I'm in a cave. I mean, that's really radical thinking. That's like she's been a Buddhist in the past, for sure. That's unbelievable. So what happened was she stayed sane in this nightmare. She didn't lose the plot. She didn't go crazy. She didn't shriek and scream and cry and get depressed and kill herself or kill somebody else, which is what we assume is the only option. So she kept sane, and the irony is, all these years, she worked on getting her freedom. She didn't give up and become passive. Because she kept her sanity, she was able to get her freedom, and she got out after 17 years. You know? I always find that example such extreme example, but such a good example. Because if we look at our lives, look at the nightmare. When you can't change the situation, you don't think to change your mind. You think, why should I? I'm allowed to be angry. We speak those words, you know. At the same time I read about this woman, I also read about some fellow who was also on death row and who was also innocent. Well, he would be what we call normal. He went out of his brain. He lost his mind completely, screaming daily as long as he had a voice. I did not rape and kill that woman. I did not rape and kill that woman. Both of them were innocent. But the tragedy is, he's what we call normal, and we're mostly like that. It didn't occur to him ever once, not even a fraction of it. This is why it's such a profound practice. I'm not trying to make this simple. It doesn't occur to us that we can. This is so hard to believe, that you can actually change your interpretation of this, because we see it as so absolute, so solid, so concrete, that we think it is the cause of all the suffering. So what do you mean change your mind about it? But this amazing woman, Sunny, knew she could reinterpret her experience. This is actually the essence of all Buddhist practice. It's not moralistic. It's not punitive. He says, there's a saying in Buddhism, if you can change something, please change it. You know, if you can get out of prison, get out of prison. If you can leave that job, for God's sake, leave it. You leave that crummy husband, leave him. But what if you can't? And that's most of us, most of the time. And this is, at this point, we go mad. Because our analysis is wrong, Buddha says. That's why when you have the view of karma, which is huge in Buddhism. For most people who study Buddhism, they don't even think about it. You think it's like an extra thing, you know. It's the fundamental point of all of Buddhist teachings. The whole of Buddhism is based upon this view of mind being not physical, of mind being driven by this natural law that, you know, of whatever we think and do produces our experiences. This is the fundamental view. This is psychology. It's Buddhist psychology. And when you have that view, when you can live within that view, when you struggle and work on living in that view. Now, this woman, Sunny, she didn't have this view. I talked to her now. She doesn't have this view of karma, but she's got this ability to see that she's got the choice to change her mind. It's extraordinary. I find it so amazing, you know. Nobody taught her. She had to have the imprints from the past, you know. So the consequence was she stayed sane. The consequence was she could work on her freedom. And that's where we think of not being angry meaning being passive. No. Not being angry means you don't lose the plot. You don't go crazy. You don't lose your mind. That poor fellow lost his mind. You say to him, you know, you could learn to be less angry. He would laugh at you. People who defended him would say, you're being outrageous. What do you mean stop being angry? He's allowed to be angry. Look at what they're doing to him. This is how we talk. This takes real unpacking. It takes real skill to think through this, you know. And this is daily practice. It's full on. It's so advanced, really. It's so sophisticated. But that's why I'm so moved by my friends in prison. So many. Over years I've known them, 25 years, many of them. Guys on death row, you know, my friend on death row, Mitchell in Kentucky. He began off being some, you know, he had a gun, his friend had a gun, they had drugs, guns and drugs equals death. Why are you surprised, you know? So he got sentenced to death in the 80s. He got sentenced to being electrocuted. So he said that's how he's going to have to die. But he's a full-time practitioner. He's amazing. This guy lives in his red jumpsuit. You know, his mummy and daddy live a couple of hours away. They're very old. He's got an ex-wife and children, grandchildren. He takes care of people. He does a daily practice, several hours. He's content with his life. He in his red jumpsuit in death row, in this dump in Kentucky, he is content. He's fulfilled. He's done everything he can, you know, and he's ready for death. I'm ready for that electric jolt, he said. His friends, all the guys on death row, you know. There's about 50 of them, 40 of them. They all love Mitchell. Because he's happy, because he's changed his mind, you know. We love stories like this, but we have to join the dots, you know. We have to see the logic of it. Look at the experiential implication of this practice, of this teaching, you know. But it's so hard to hear it. We say all these words since we first heard Buddhism, but you look back at yourself 10, 20 years, 30 years, and you see, wow, I'm only just beginning. I'm only just beginning to do this, you know. It's so hard. It's stupendously hard. So we have to be very humble and very kind with ourselves, you know. But that's why we have to know we have the power to change our mind and know the logical reason why you'd want to, because that's the source of your happiness. I mean, we sort of know it so clearly when we look at experiences. We look at people who are the richest, fanciest people on the planet, and they kill themselves. You can be the poorest, saddest person on the planet, and not sad, poor, but you're happy. We hear it, it's kind of like a cliche for us. We don't join the dots. The difference is the quality of their mind. The difference is the presence or absence of attachment and anger. That's the essence. All the delusions are rooted in attachment and anger. It's as simple as that, you know. It's very fascinating, super fascinating, and so profound. So we've got to be so humble with ourselves and so patient, you know. And that's why it goes slowly. And that's why you have to do the first level of work first. If you're out of control, you know, if you can't control your mind, therefore you can't control the servants of your mind, which is your body and your speech. That's what makes you go crazy, and that's what makes you harm others. Look at the world, you know. So if you can't control we can't control our mind. That's why our body and speech are out of control. That's why we kill and steal and lie and torture and rape and drop bombs and all the other things you see the world does, and animals as well. It's driven by the mind. It's driven by what's in our mind. And then we're programmed. I mean, we're driven by the force of our past karma. This is where it's so hard, because if we're driven by the force of our past karma, we can't even see our mind. This is the tragedy when karma is so strong. So always give a simple example. I always quote this story. This woman I met in Courtin nearly 30 years ago now. And she was listening to some teachings of Lama Zopa about karma. And I met her years later. She's not a Buddhist, but she heard these teachings and about karma and about killing and all these things. She was devastated. She came to my room in tears because she said her boy, who'd been 29, had died 5 years before. He died 5 years before, and he'd been a fisherman all his life. So she was devastated because, you know, she thought he died doing what he loved. He died when he died scuba diving. So then she heard about this. She wondered where he'd been reborn. She heard about karma. She was devastated, you know. So anyway, the point is this is an amazing example of the mechanics of how we create samsara, how past karma and our present mind all work together to perpetuate our suffering experiences. It's very, very fascinating, actually. So, like I said before, in the first group of states of mind, it's all the neurotic ones: deluded, unhappy, I-based, fear-based, ego-based, attachment, anger, and all the other dramas. And we're driven by these. These are so primordial, depending on our habits, you know, and they're very instinctive. They're very instinctive. They're very instinctive. It's not as if your mummy teaches you anger. She didn't teach me anger. I knew how to be angry since a little girl. Why? Because I was programmed from the past, not from mummy's and daddy's programming. This is Buddha's view about karma, from my own programming. That woman in prison, Sunny, she clearly had strong tendencies for super intelligence, emotional intelligence, and kindness and compassion, and very confidence kind of mind, that she knew she was able to change the way she saw things. That's a very unusual quality on this planet, especially in the face of such unbelievable suffering, you know. So anyway, we've got the neurotic states of mind, and we have the virtues. Now, our virtues, they're our saving grace, okay? We don't think in psychological terms in the West, we do not talk about ethics. We just think it sounds a bit like religion. But ethics is profound. If you're born with good ethics from past practice, if you're born with a wish not to lie, not to steal, not to kill, not to rape, you're incredibly fortunate. You've practiced these before. You might have lots of attachment and anger, but you don't have those ones. That means you've got good ethics, and this is your saving grace, I tell you. So we've got the negative, neurotic, deluded states of mind that lead us up garden paths, the voices of ego. Then we've got the virtuous, valid ones: love, compassion, intelligence, all those ones. And then you've got these mechanics, I like to call them that: intention, attention, concentration, good memory, discrimination. There's many of these, and they're all working like crazy, enabling us to function. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need concentration. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need good discrimination. It's a particular part of your mind. These are working super sophisticated parts of our mind, the mechanics of our mind. And they're neither negative in their character nor positive. These are particular characteristics, but they're necessary. So in that category, it's very curious. There's one called feeling. And it's either you only have three kinds of feeling, this way this word is used. We either have pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, or neutral feelings. Well, let's forget the neutral. Pleasant feelings is another word for happiness. But our trouble is we're so addicted to the outside world being the cause of pleasant feelings that we conflate the cake with happiness. We conflate the boyfriend and happiness. We think even the boyfriend is the happiness. Not to mention as well the cause of happiness. But happiness is another word for pleasant feeling. So there's a whole range of pleasant feelings, aren't there? There's either the mildest pleasant feeling to the most intense rapture and bliss. Think about it. They're all simply pleasant feelings. And feeling is mind. You've got sensory as well. That's mind also. So we are all, attachment is the junkie in us that is frantic to get pleasant feelings all the time. And then when it doesn't, you have an unpleasant feeling. And so we can't stand unpleasant feelings. That's called suffering. And we desperately want pleasant feelings. We run between these two all the time. So now what happens is this. When this little boy was born, when he went to fishing when he was about 3. Fishing had never occurred to him until he met fishing. So these many tendencies are in our mind, but they won't manifest until we meet the condition that triggers them, you know. So he hadn't thought of killing fish before, but he met fishing. And basically what happens is because killing was a tendency in his mind, it's one of the 4 ways that our karma ripens. We discussed this, I think, last week. One of the 4 ways our karma ripens from our past is our tendency to do something again. So this boy clearly had that tendency to kill fish. He didn't kill his grandmother. He didn't want to kill dogs. He didn't want to kill, you know, other things or birds. It was turning out that he had karma with fish. So the minute he met fishing, it's like it triggers, the memory of it is triggered because it's implanted in his mind. The memory of it's triggered, you know. And up comes this, it's like a memory that the karmic seed is triggered. That instant that he has contact with the fishing, a pleasant feeling arises, a pleasant feeling. And in his case, very pleasant feeling called happiness. He doesn't know why he feels happy watching fishing. His mother never told him, she didn't like it. But he had karmic connection with fishing. So he met the scenario and that millisecond pleasant feeling was triggered. And then what happened is next millisecond, attachment takes over. And attachment is the ability to embellish that, in that case, fishing. It made fishing look divine. So this is what keeps us in samsara. The pleasant feeling came when he saw fishing. The pleasant feeling came when he went fishing. So logically, you deduce that fishing must be the cause of pleasant feelings. We all want pleasant feelings, so logically he had decided to do it again. This is how we live our lives. If you come into this life attachment to girl shapes, you're a boy, let's say, and you're attached to having contact with girl shapes. My friend Panos in Greece, I always tell this story. He was 6. Walking down the street of Athens with his Greek Orthodox mummy. He simply lays his eyes on the shape and color of a poster that happened to be a female shape. He's imprinted in his mind strong connection with female shapes, right? So the second his eyes lay on that shape triggers this feeling in his body and mind, pleasure, and then even attachment is triggered, and he shouted out loud, "Mummy, why is my penis standing up?" This is exactly like the fisherman, except the fisherman probably didn't have his stand up, because what happened was strong karmic connection with girl shapes. He's programmed with girl shapes, okay? Boys know all about this. He's programmed in his mind with familiarity with girl shapes, attachment to girl shapes. The second he just sees a poster, he's 6. Pleasure, instantly, that the karmic imprint is triggered. He doesn't remember it's a memory. Pleasure is instantly triggered. And then the next second, attachment takes over and makes it look divine. All this happens in like a millisecond. And of course he believes in this story. So of course he wants those feelings again. We're all the same. It's why we do anything we do. So he doesn't have a choice about it. You don't have a choice. You're just blind. You just go, oh, this must be the cause of my happiness. So what did he do since a little boy? He thought about girl shapes all the time. And when he saved up his money, he told me when he was 12, the first thing he bought was not a toy train, I promise. It was a prostitute. I'm not criticizing him. He's a nice guy. He just happened to have, I mean, boys know about this. Girls, maybe less, I'm not sure, but boys have things that stand up. And that's not your body, that's your mind. Program with attachment to girl shapes, therefore it brings pleasure. We all want pleasure, so attachment kicks in. So the logical conclusion is having girls must be the cause of my happiness. That's it, so simple. And then the fisherman, unfortunately, was killing people. But the fish, I mean, the world thinks fishing's okay. But what if you've got attachment to torture? One of my friends on death row, Mitchell, told me, he said, Robina, he thinks of torture all the time. Well, instead of thinking of girl shapes all the time, or of cakes all the time, or of killing fish all the time, he had a karmic connection with harming people, and that's how he got his pleasure. This we think is horrible in our culture, but this is the logic of it. It's habit. We're driven by the power of our past habits. We're like lemmings, we think we have choices. We do have a choice if we become conscious, and we can change our habits, but it's not that easy. This is the point. So this is a combination of past karma, the present condition, contact with it, pleasure is triggered, attachment takes over. We are locked into samsara from then on. So that's why we keep doing what we do. Eating cake, killing, raping, torturing, whatever it might be. Even the benign actions is driven by this contact from past life, the pleasant feelings that arise, and then attachment. And this is the technology of it. If we begin to understand that, we can unpack it and then start to not believe in those karmic appearances. And the tragedy of following attachment is that you are blind to seeing the harm you cause. So cake doesn't mind being eaten, okay? It's not sentient. Beings don't like being raped, don't like being killed. But because he has this karmic connection to do it, and he gets pleasure, and because it's accepted in our society, and because fish don't scream and yell, fish don't have legs, they can't shout, they wriggle their body, it's about the best they can do, isn't it? But all those years, and he's a kind, good man, the mother said. All those years he went fishing, and he was a professional fisherman, attached to it, thought about it all the time. One of the signs of attachment is you think of the object all the time. Look at our minds, I'm attached to food. I do my practice in the morning, and I'm very good at my practice. I do practice every day. But what am I thinking of? I'm anticipating my breakfast, But food is in my mind. Nothing, I don't care about boys. I don't care about money. I don't care about clothes. I don't care about handbags. I don't care about holidays. I mean, I'm fortunate. But food, yep. What else has a nun got, Food. I try to control it, of course. It's just there. You laugh at it, because it's an old habit. Habits die hard. We know that. But can you imagine? This is the point about the fisherman. It looks so benign. The world thinks it's okay. No one criticizes it, which means we're blind to seeing the suffering of the fish. Well, his mummy went fishing with him one time. She didn't like fishing, but she went to make her boy happy. This is the point. Because she did not have attachment to killing fish, she was not getting pleasant feelings from it. So she could see nakedly that the fish were not happy. He was intelligent. He watched those fish every day for those 25 years he went fishing. He saw fish flapping their little bodies in the boat. He never interpreted it for what it was, which is called the fish suffering. This is really, really fascinating. It's so evident if you analyze it. He couldn't see suffering. Because why? Because his attachment had painted a delicious picture and planted it on top of the fishing. In other words, it's an interpretation. Everything is interpretation. Everything is interpretation. And either it's an interpretation that is valid, that is in sync with reality, or it's not. And all the delusions paint invalid interpretations. And we believe those lies since beginningless time, Buddha says. So we believe our feelings, in other words. So if something caused a good feeling, we think it must be okay. And then, of course, if the world doesn't support it, like torturing, that poor man had to do it in secret because world doesn't approve of torture. But he was compelled to do it. He thought of it all the time. He must have done it before. So think of the suffering of that. Think of being a pedophile when all you can do is think of little girls all day, non-stop. There's fantasies in your mind. Yeah, keep him in prison. Protect the little girls, I agree, from him, but protect him from causing harm. Then you understand the suffering of the mind. And until you understand your own mind, honeys, you will not understand the suffering of other people's minds. That's a fact. And we're talking attachment here. Just attachment. So this is how we are locked into our habits, locked into samsara. So we've got to unpack our minds and see all these things and learn it, learn the technology of how we create samsara, and distinguish between facts and fiction. That's the point. It's so hard because because our good feelings, the only way we get good feelings, isn't it? The only way we know how to get good feelings is to get into object of attachment. That's the only method we have in our world. That's why it's so desperate. That's why we feel we can't hear Buddha when he says we've got to give up attachment, because we don't know how else to get pleasure. We don't know what he's telling us, which is, I've got some methods, children, to help you get such pleasure you won't believe it. He's telling us. That's why it's so encouraging to read all the literature about the nature of our mind. Lama Yeshe talks about it all the time, to make us realize that our mind is in its nature blissful, naturally, when it's no longer encumbered by the delusions. It's our natural state to be joyful, fulfilled, content, as well as loving, kind, compassionate. These are our natural state. So when we're unencumbered by delusions, we will taste the joy of our own mind. And I am being literal, okay? So Buddha's telling us he's found methods to get happy that doesn't depend upon sensory objects. Of course, it's hard to give it up because we're all junkies, This is being locked in samsara. This is why attachment is the main cause. I think you have to ask me some questions. Come on, 1:15. Ask me some questions. No questions? Nothing there. Rebecca?
Nothing in the chat, Venerable Robina.
Okay. Who's that?
I have a question, Robina.
Yes, Arturo, tell me, darling.
Hi. I'm wondering about prayer in this process of changing the mind. And I've questioned, I use prayer, but more and more I'm not sure, to whom I'm praying and what the Buddhist view of that might be.
No, it's a really good question. Thank you, darling. Okay, so in a sense, what we're talking here, okay, how to say it? What we're talking here is the actual nuts and bolts of the direct job that we need to do in order to unpack and unravel our mind and change it. You get the point? This is the heart job. So the analogy here would be the actual heart job of playing tennis is sitting on the court with the racket and the ball and playing with somebody. That's the heart job of tennis. But we all know if you walked up to Roger Federer and you're 20 pounds overweight and have never played tennis and you're not on a good diet, he'll give you a whole bunch of practices first to do. It doesn't look like it's directly related to tennis. He'll tell you to go jogging and lose weight and do this, and he will do that, wouldn't he? It's logical, and you'll know that Tibetans would call that your preliminary practices. So they're the things that will prime your body and your mind so that now you can go to the tennis court and do the actual job of playing tennis. Well, this is the actual job of being a Buddhist. But the work we need to do and the tools we need to use to support us would be to do our prostrations, to do our practices every day, to do our purification practices, to use lots of prayer. These are the things that prime our body and mind. They're tools we use to enable us to do the job of working on our mind. Can you hear the point, the analogy? So prayer in Buddhism is massive, especially Tibetan Buddhist, because that means, okay, we have to now understand what a Buddha is, all right? Buddhist point of view, what is a Buddha? Well, according to the Buddhist teachings, every single being in the universe has the potential to become a Buddha. And the logic is, since the time of the Buddha, lots of people have become a Buddha. They followed Buddha's methodology, they did the job that he did, and they got the goal. That's the assumption is. So there's lots of minds out there. And mind in its nature is not physical. So when you finally develop your mind to perfection, which is what they say a Buddha is, when you finally removed all the delusions, all the nonsense, and developed to perfection all the wisdom and all the compassion, then literally your mind, like they say in Christianity, God is everywhere. It's exactly the same point. Buddha, your mind pervades the universe. You have infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, infinite capacity to help others, which in Buddhist view includes manifesting in bodies to benefit others. So there's many beings who are Buddhas, well, whom we pray to as Tibetan Buddhists is all those beings who've achieved this goal before us. It's like if you're a Catholic, you pray to God, but you also pray to the saints. It's a bit like that. And they're out there dying to help because it's their job. They don't just disappear into light when you finish your job. So there's millions of beings out there. This is very much the Tibetan Buddhist view, the Vajrayana Buddhist view. So we pray to the different Buddhas. We pray, and that gives us, it's sort of like, so it's like a bit like prayer means you're relying upon a good teacher to teach you tennis. You rely upon Federer. Please, Mr. Federer, show me how to play tennis. You talk to him. You ask him to help you. That's necessary for you to play tennis. So that's really what prayer is. And it's a huge role. It plays a big role in our practice. It gives you courage. It gives you optimism. And they say literally these beings are there. And by requesting is one of the causes for them to receive, to help, you know. Does that make sense? Didn't hear you. I'm presuming
Yes, it does make sense. Thank you. Thank you
Okay,
so
good.
much.
Thanks, darling.
Okay.
And it sort of, we need to rely on what we can get. We have to do the work. You've got to play tennis, but you've got to do good diet, talk to your nutritionist, you request your nutritionist, please help me. That's prayer. Prayer's aspiration. Please help me. Your nutritionist help you. Federer helps you. Your friends help you. I mean, there are all these tools that support you where you do the job of playing tennis, but these are all the support. All of our different practices are like that, and our prayer and all these practices are very much like that. There's support we use so we can do the actual job of working on our mind. Do you see? That's the idea, Katua. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good point. Thanks.
Venerable
Yes.
Robina?
Yes, darling. Talk to me.
Yes. At the moment, I'm very sick. Well, you know I'm sick. But I'm not afraid of dying.
Uh-huh.
I do not know how to overcome like so much physical pain that I'm in to where I almost can't do my daily practice. And the fear is, yes, I'm here. I have to recognize I have a body. The body gets sick. The body gets pain. But the pain is so overwhelming that what the question I'm asking is I'm poor. I live alone. I don't have any help. I'm on the second floor and my breathing, I can't go out anymore. I can't get up the steps. And what your suggestion of how to live like that?
I find it impossibly hard to imagine living like that, sweetheart. But this is the tragedy. I mean, you say you're a Buddhist, right? You've got Buddhist practice.
I am. I am.
So then theoretically, I mean, it's sort of brutal of me to tell you what to do because I don't have a situation like that. I can tell you the suffering of my friend Sunny and how she coped with it, and you understand exactly what I'm saying. But this is, I mean, if you have a practice, you know the answers to all this, but I can't imagine how difficult it is, darling. There's no miracle. You know the teachings, you know it's due to past karma, and you know it's your mind, and you know the conditions you've got are due to your karma. So all you can do, precious girl, is use what tools you've got. What choice do you have, darling? I mean, if I could take your pain away tomorrow, I'd be happy to do that.
No, it's what I'm
But you see my point, Lamo, you have to, you know the teachings, you've got the practice. All you can do is use what tools you've got. That's what each one of us can do. And then, you know, it sounds pretty dire to me. It sounds pretty suffering. But you know, in a sense, you know the answers because you know the teachings, darling.
Okay, so let me put that I do, and I've practiced for quite some
And I can't imagine it must be so hard. I can't imagine the difficulties, Lamo. It's
So-
unbelievable.
So let me ask you in a different way. Since I'm still alive and on a basic level of human or any sentient being, I need food, basic necessity.
So what's the question, sweetheart?
The question
What's the question,
is,
Lamo? How can I really try? I want to help you. How can I help you, Lamo? What is your question that I can answer?
I don't know how to make plans. I've tried.
What do you mean,
That
sweetheart?
people,
Plans?
those
Sweetheart, what
that
do you mean plans, darling?
plans of others,
What,
physically,
sweetheart? What?
plans with others.
What do you mean by plans with others, Lamo?
Well, wait, to help me help myself.
So what are you asking me then? How can I help you? I want to help you, Lamo. Would you please tell me what you want? I want to help you. Tell me what you want and I'll see if I can help you.
Okay, I need people to help me get the basic
You
necessities.
need friends. So now where do you live, darling?
In Century Village in Deerfield.
Right. So you have no friends and no people who support you.
Yes, there's many people from the center
So they
who
don't
live
help.
here.
So they don't help you.
No,
Do
I've
they know?
asked.
So have you ever asked them to help you?
Yes, yes.
And they say no.
Well, they're busy or this.
They say
or
no.
that.
So you don't have anybody to help you. So if this is your life, I don't know what to say to you, Lamo. I don't know, darling. I don't know how to help you, precious. I wish I could be there. I wish I could manifest in different bodies. But if there's nobody to help you, how do you understand this yourself? What is the cause of this? Do you have any analysis of it? This is just a discussion with you because you're a Buddhist. I'm just curious.
Yes.
What is your analysis of this and how do you learn to live with this? It's like my friend Sunny on death row in her own cell on her own for 10 years. She found methods. I'm not telling you anything, but I'm telling you what she told me, which I find admirable. Now, you seem to have the suffering of having no friends, no support, and sickness and aloneness and no money. That sounds pretty terrible to me. So if you can't find friends, Lamo, if you can't find support, if you can't find money, and if you can't find medicine, what do you think is left for you to do, precious girl?
I practice death and dying. That's what I do.
Well, then that's I have such admiration, like my friend Sunny. I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say, you know. I don't know what to say. I'm not there. If I could manifest in bodies, I would do it, sweetheart. Do you not have anybody you can do? How do you get your money?
Through SSI goes into the bank.
And how much money do you need to live every month?
I receive $780.
And that's to pay your rent and your food.
That's it.
And do you survive on that or not?
It depends on what you mean by survive.
I mean, what do you survive? Do you survive?
I have electricity.
And you get food. You buy yourself food. How do you get the food? Do people deliver it to you or you got to go buy it?
I can't anymore this past year. I used to.
Right.
But I can't anymore.
Are you sort of seeing my point? I can't give you lectures. I can't give you lectures about how to practice. You've got those yourself. Your life sounds awful to me, darling. And I have such compassion for you. And if I could help you, I would. But what are you? This is the tragedy, Lamo. Each of us has our own life. Each of us has our own scenario. Each of us has our own suffering. And all I can do is give the teachings that I'm trying to practice and give examples of people I know who've done the practice in order to each one of us try to take this advice and use it in our lives to help us alleviate our own suffering, isn't it?
But one thing I'd like to say, inside, I am not unhappy. Actually,
if you're not unhappy, then I admire you. Then that means you're doing really well.
No, I'm not.
That means you don't need help. That means you're fine. Okay, it'd be nice to have people to help you, but do you ever reach out to help other people? Because sometimes helping other people can be the best method for us.
As best I can now, but prior the last 20 years that I've been part of this particular center, and before in New York, before in India, I always offered to help others.
So special, darling. Well, I have great admiration for you.
It's just, I don't know when I get hungry and I run out of food now. It's just a basic outside some sour.
Well, you've got to do your best to find the support you need, darling. You've got to do your best, because in the end, if people don't help us, then we have to do something to try and make it happen and keeping our minds optimistic. I mean, life is tough, darling, and you're giving the exact example to show that life is difficult. But if you have the Buddhist analysis to help you know why it's like this, and then if you can get people to support you, you do everything you can to get people to support you, sweetheart. Keep reaching out to people and see what you can get.
That's all I have to do. I try.
Exactly, darling. Thank you so much, Mamo.
Yeah, thank you, Robina. But I just want to say inside, I'm okay.
Good, I'm so happy.
I'm really okay.
You have faith in the Buddhas?
That's all I have for you.
Good, darling. Wonderful. I admire you, Lamo. I admire you, darling. You do.
Since I was very young.
I admire you, darling. It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Lamo.
Thank you
Do
very
you
much.
have any questions?
Yes, Venerable Robina, there are some questions coming in the chat.
Good.
And Lama, I'll call you this week. We are happy to help you. I'm sorry that you're having a hard time. Sorry, really. Lou has a question. He says, please, can you talk a bit more about the delusion that comes from the invalid interpretation of the thing's experiences?
Who's asked the question? Lou. Is Lou here?
Yes.
I think I'd like you to ask that yourself, Lou, and let's have a discussion. I don't quite understand the question. Where are you, Lou? Can you talk to me?
Okay, here I am. Hi.
Good morning. Talk to me, sweetheart.
No, yes, I just don't understand what, I mean, I understand how the delusions comes from the invalid interpretation that we make of the things and experience that we have. So I would like if you could explain a little bit more about
Which
that.
delusion in particular, Lou? There's many. I mean, the main ones are attachment and aversion. So which one are you discussing in particular?
Well, I would like to know more about the aversion. Attachment is already very clear. So,
Tell me what you think attachment is.
well, the things that are outside of me, the things that I believe that in order to accomplish them, I will get a pleasant feeling. So that really.
Okay, so okay, good. So thanks, Lou. So attachment is very subtle, very deep inside us. That's always working. This is at a more subtle level, and it's really, Lou, at the level of an assumption. We get up in the morning, and there's an assumption that we're going to feel good. There's an assumption we want to feel good. There's an assumption we'll get what we want. There's an assumption everything will go nice, and the attachment hungrily wants that. That's what drives us. So now, the millisecond, Lou, that attachment doesn't get what it wants. You knock your toe on the bed, aversion arises. You don't get the tea on time. The husband is making a noise when he drinks his tea. The kids don't do what you want. The traffic light keeps going red. Something doesn't work. The fridge breaks. Something, you understand, tiny baby things in a normal daily life without the dramas. Don't wait for Lamo's experience of having constant pain. Don't wait to be on death row and be falsely accused for really extreme aversion to arise. Look at the daily events when something arises that you don't want. That's the arising of aversion, Lou. Really subtle levels, but we ignore them until suddenly your husband leaves you or the job sacks you or something dreadful happens and then you lose the plot. That's the two we're running between all the time. So it's learning to navigate those two is really the essence of daily practice. Then on top of that, you get the jealousy, the resentment, the low self-esteem, the arrogance, all the other dramas on top. But these are the fundamentals, and it sounds so simple, but it is primordially deep. Do you understand?
The delusion is the aversion. I mean, is the interpretation.
What's the question?
The delusion is that interpretation, is the invalid interpretation that the things are gonna be the way I plan them.
Okay, so anger is the name, or aversion is the name we give to the state of mind that over-exaggerates the badness of the thing that happened. So if you stub your toe and you shout, that's aversion arising, that's thinking that should not have happened, that was bad. And then if attachment gets what it wants, attachment over-exaggerates the goodness and the niceness of the thing. And we're running between these. So they're both misinterpretations. So as extreme attachment, and like you're in love with a new boyfriend or whatever it might be, then you're really, the attachment is grossly exaggerating that person's divine qualities, grossly exaggerating their capacity to make you happy. And then the aversion is, when that's extreme anger that is grossly exaggerating the bad aspects of the thing. That's these two main delusions, misinterpretations, misconceptions that are running us all the time. Can you hear?
Yes, yes.
So it's the awareness of them as they're arising. So what would you do? So like a baby example, you stub your toe. We notice the pain and then we hear the mind get angry. We catch it. It's okay. It's only the toe. You adjust your thinking. You don't fall into the trap. When the thing that happens is frustrating you, you check your thinking. You check it's because your attachment's not getting what it wants. So you navigate it. You speak yourself through it. So you steady yourself, you know. I mean, this is like, for example, Lama, which is basically telling us she's living in pain, she's poor, she's got no friends, no support, nothing that she can get. So then if she's not a saint already, if she's not a bodhisattva, that means every time her attachment doesn't get what it wants, she gets upset, she gets annoyed, she gets frustrated, or she feels sorry for herself. This is normal behavior. We're all like that. If she were a bodhisattva, she'd be blissful and joyful and enjoying her suffering. So we can see where we're all at, you know. So as long as we have attachment, we're always expecting the good thing. And as long as we have attachment and it doesn't get what it wants, then we'll have aversion. Then all the voice starts, poor me, it's not fair, you know, this shouldn't be happening to me. All of these voices are very subtle inside us. These are all the delusions. The virtuous interpretations, we have to cultivate those. Patience and kindness and love and generosity. And you understand, we have to cultivate those. They're there too. You see what I'm saying? It's the daily work of our minds, sweetheart. Do you understand, Lou?
Yes, it's tough. It's
Oh,
tough.
good, darling. Good. I'm very happy. Good, sweetheart. We see it. We recognize it. No, this is baby stuff. And in other words, don't wait till you're put on death row to start working on your mind. Deal with the baby things first. That's the real skill. Yeah. Who else? Any other questions?
You just answered the other one. So
Oh, I'm
that's
very happy. Okay, good. I mean, I think this is universal. We can all see this. And this is the point I'm trying to say to Lama without giving her lectures. If we understand karma, we will know why things are happening. That'll be our explanation for it, and we'll be able to own the experience. But if we don't have the view of karma, I'm not talking about Lama here, I'm talking about all of us. If we don't understand why things happen, why the husband leaves me, why I've got a headache all the time, why I can't get a job, why the bank doesn't give me credit. If we don't understand why, which is from our own past actions, we will feel like a victim. It's not fair. Poor me. That's how we all suffer so badly. So that's why the view of karma is so profound, not some kind of heavy duty thing. It explains why things happen. When we are able to explain to ourselves why things happen, we will own those experiences without self-pity. But that's really tough, you know. And then you work on your mind now. This is full-on, daily, in-your-face Buddhist practice. It's not easy, but this is the practice. This is what it is, you know. And then on the basis of this, we get compassion for others because we realize we're all in the same boat, you know. So, you know, like Sunny talks about how she was able to change her mind, meaning her interpretation of that nightmare, husband executed, children taken away from her, parents killed, accused of murder. It's not like physical pain like what Lama's got, but it's like that. But she was able to change her interpretation of this. And she said, I decided I'm not a prisoner. I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell. I'm in a cave. I mean, this is incredible, powerful mind, incredibly powerful, you know, unbelievably sophisticated, amazing practice. And I mean, she's not a Buddhist, she just has this ability. She's always having past karma, you know. What else, people? Anything? No? Okay. So then what do we talk about? Let's think more about the mind, obviously. Okay, so these are the two main ones we run between, like I was explaining to Lou, you know, and to all of us. Attachment is the default mode, and it's obviously the grosser levels, which we try in the earlier stages to try and control. That's why the grosser levels of practice, we at least attempt to have some discipline over our body and speech. Don't just, and even for us, it's a good one to talk about in our culture, forget about our mind. But look at our speech, you know, in our culture, we don't have any respect for speech or even see it as important. We feel I can say what I like, we say, you know. So, I mean, the Buddha's view is if we can't control our body and can't control our speech, and maybe most of us don't go around raping and killing too many people, but we love our speech. So, you know, the 4 parts of our speech that the Buddha would suggest we steady, calm down, would be that First of all, don't say words that aren't true. Now, you've got to ask Buddha, why would he suggest we don't do this? Like I said last week with karma, because he says, Robina, honey, everything you do and say and think programs you, turns you into that kind of person. So if you want to sit there all day shouting and yelling and abusing and bad-mouthing politicians behind their backs and gossiping on about nothing and saying words that aren't true, forget the harm you do to other people. What kind of person are you producing? It's so evident. We're so disconnected from ourselves that we actually don't think it has an effect on who we are. That's pretty demented. You've got to agree that's pretty unintelligent. Because whatever you think and do and say produces who you become. It's somehow so evident, yet in our culture we don't think it matters. So the first level of practice, control your body and control what comes out your mouth. So you are the immediate beneficiary of that. And then eventually, at least as well, you won't harm others. It's pretty miraculous. That's a profound level of practice. So control our speech and just blurt out what we feel. You know, so we say, I'm allowed to say what I like. We feel like we've got permission. I mean, as if someone's squashing us and telling us not to say. But the reason Buddha gives us advice not to badmouth people is like the doctor advising you not to eat sugar. It'll cause you suffering. Don't worry about the people. It's yourself that he's talking about. At this level, it's benefit to yourself. So we've got to listen to this and think about it. Not feel guilty. Not feel we're being suppressed. Think about the benefit of what comes out your mouth. So if it isn't true, shut up. Don't mislead people. If it's just rabbiting on meaninglessly, so you've got this compulsion to speak, and you have no interest whether the person wants to hear it, be quiet. If you want to shout and yell at somebody, try not to. And if you want to badmouth the politicians behind backs, which is the favorite activity we have, shut your mouth. I mean, it's pretty profound to have whatever comes out your mouth to be useful. Think of that in ordinary life. Think of that. This is an incredible practice. Don't underestimate this as a practice before you get anywhere near controlling your mind. If you can control your body and speech, you can begin to control your mind. If your body and speech are berserk, it means your mind's berserk, so you can't possibly control your mind. So this is a really powerful level of practice. Be conscious and be appropriate and attempt, if it's negative, don't say it. This almost sounds like Pollyanna to us. We sound like a pathetic person, you know. It is a profound level of practice. There's this wonderful practice called blessing the speech, you know, which is so delicious. It's really just reciting different Sanskrit sounds, you know, that bless the speech. But as Lama Zopa says, the main way to bless your speech, the main way to have the power of speech, which eventually is the best gift of the Buddha, the way to begin to make your speech more powerful, more useful, more beneficial. And even in ordinary life, we need speech. You go to a shop, you want to ask for something. If no one believes your speech, no one values your speech, and no one believes your speech, they won't listen to you. So you want a power of speech. The first step is shut up. Be silent. It's a profound practice. Then when you do speak, that's where mantras can come in. Say mantra, that blesses your speech. It's a profound. Sanskrit sounds are said to be very marvelous, you know. And then when you do talk, it'll be useful and people will actually listen to you. So, you know, the karma of past lying, for example, past lives, is that now no one believes you. The karma of past lying is you get lied to. The karma of abusive speech from past life is that people will, you'll hear abuse all the time, or people will abuse you, you know. The negative karma of harsh speech is there's all kinds of the karmic results, and one kind of result of all karmas is the environmental karma. So the environmental karma of abusive speech is you're born in a desert, you live in a desert, nothing can grow. So speech is so powerful. We need it in daily life. And we wonder why we get so hurt if people don't trust us or don't believe us or don't listen to us. There's a karma of being female. These days it's changing. You just got these meaningless words coming out your mouth. I mean, you know, in some countries you've got to cover your body from head to toe and a girl voice comes out. No one even pays attention. So like an animal burping, you know, that's the karma of gossiping in a past life when nobody pays any attention to your speech. We understand this. So this is a really profound level of practice. Control your speech, control your body. Then it's easier to control your mind. That's why it's junior school practice. Then mind is high school practice. But the real one to see, like I began talking before, is that all the emotions we have, that these thoughts pouring, filling our head, so powerful. And then we have to vomit them out because we're so full of emotion. The body experiencing them is just the tip of the iceberg. It's because those thoughts are so strong, so habitual. So look at Panos, what happened to his body because he had strong attachment to girl shapes. Look at your body when you're shouting and yelling because you've got strong anger in the mind. The body is just the expression, is just the tip of the iceberg, is just the indicator of what's going on in the mind. And that all of them come down to being conceptual stories. And the delusions are exaggerated stories. You know, these days, I mean, in the world, I just find it so mind-boggling. It's always been like this. All these conspiracy theories, you know. I mean, a conspiracy theory is if it's a conspiracy theory, is believing something, and there's a suggestion, like for example, I don't know, I read about these things, the QAnon people. I don't know, some people believe these things. So Buddha says we're all superstitious. Attachment believes a cake will make you happy. He says that's a superstition. A cake is not the cause of your happiness, but you believe it. But we've all got conspiracy theories. We all believe the devil is in charge or God is in charge. That's a conspiracy theory. You all believe there's, these pedophiles around somewhere. I mean, all these things you read about QAnon. Or even believing all the people behind all the suffering and because of this. We're living in conspiracy theories all the time. And man, we hear a certain thing, and then what we do is we embellish that story, and then we believe it. So all I know is sometimes these days, because there's so much social media, everybody's vomiting out every story in the planet. And because of social media, they're all becoming absolute. They're all becoming like 4,000 Bibles we've written. This is reality. And everybody will believe anything. So to have a bit of common sense about what we hear and whether and use our common sense to decide is that valid or not, that's a really important quality. It's called intelligence, Even believing that people at work hate you. Think of this. There's a woman who's just written to me. People write, people write for advice. I try to give advice. And one person writing, and this is how we all are, because there's a particular person at the job or something who doesn't like her. So this is the point. We don't do the analysis. So she's wondering, what is she thinking she's trying to do? Is she trying to give me a teaching? What is she thinking? Maybe she means this, maybe she means that. We speculate. It's like we're writing a conspiracy theory. We don't really know what's true or not, but we get, because she's there dying to be loved, this person is showing they don't love her. So she's making up all these stories. We all do this. She's elaborating. She's making up a story about what she thinks the woman's thinking. We just never stop making things up. We just never stop. This is what delusions do. We go mad. We've got to know what's real and what's not, We've got to decide what's valid and what's not. We've got to calm ourselves down, It's very fascinating. We're all delusional, Buddha says. We're all believing in conspiracy theories. We're all, paranoid. We make up things all the time. And that's the function of attachment. And then pride, and then jealousy, and big combinations of these. And we write these stories all the time. I mean, we're all insane, It's very interesting. That's not the Buddha's view of karma. No one's behind anything. It's just collective karma. Things happen. There's no big visionary behind. That for me is like the QAnon one or any other theories that people have. There's always somebody behind everything. There's this kind of some secret plan somewhere. There's no such thing like that in Buddhism. It's all just karma, collective karma of individual beings all doing their trip. There's no person who's got a clever mind behind it all. That's just giving far more power to somebody than they really got. What time is it? 10 to, nearly time to go home.
Venerable Robina, there is one question from Annie on karma. Annie, unmute yourself.
Go, Annie. Go, Annie. You're still blocked, Annie. Still muted, sweetheart. Unmute yourself, darling. There
you go.
There you go.
Can you
Good.
hear me?
I can hear you, Annie. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Good, sweetheart.
Okay. So I don't I wanted to ask this last week, and I don't know how to ask it. So let's say I did something really bad to somebody, and then in the next life, would it be that exact person that I would play out this karma?
I understand, Annie. Yeah,
Or can it just be?
Good point. It's a good question. Let's just look at the principles. If you think about, okay, if we think a natural law, so let's say botany is we understand this, botany is a natural law. We know that no one's made it up and no one's running it. It's a natural law, given the conditions, as certain conditions come together, you put a seed in one place and a fruit will come. So we know it's natural, we know it's logical, we know it's coherent, and we know it can't, therefore, whatever grows, it can't be random. That's a good, would you agree with that as a conclusion? If there's such a thing as a natural law, there has to be logic to all of it. Would you agree with that, Annie, in general?
Yes.
Okay, well, the Buddha says that about karma. It is a natural law. No one made it up. No one runs it. There's no conspiracy theorists. There's no one bossing it around. It's a very natural law. So then from that point of view, you think about how we, like a child going to, are you a mum? Are you a mum? Are you a mother?
No.
Okay, I'm not a mother either.
No.
So say, okay, so let's just say there's, a child. Okay, I'll use my example. I always use my example of my abortion, not to upset you, but it's a good example because I did have a baby one time. So, okay, there I was 23 in London and I got pregnant. And I remember the day, the second, and that second I knew, I didn't know the words then, a consciousness came to my womb. Now we think it's kind of a random event having a baby, but the karmic one, there is no way in the universe a sentient being who had just died could randomly come to my womb. There has to be a really intense history with each other. There's no question that could be random. I remember even one Lama, this sounds hilarious. One Lama said at the time you're having, let's say you're having sex with somebody, at the billions of consciousnesses are all desperate to get a rebirth. But that baby, that person who had strong karma with me, they came straight to my womb. So that everybody we meet has to be this way, Annie. You can't, I mean, the cause for meeting another person again is if you've created history together. The cause of somebody being loving to you, and as soon as they meet you, they think you're gorgeous. They believe your words. That's really personal karma. From that particular person, you must have told the truth to that person in the past. That's why they believe you now. And then that you must have been kind to that person. That's why they even see you in that way. So yes, karma has to be super personal. It has to be that way. Some people, we meet some people, we hate we can't stand them. I love Mr. Trump as an example. It seems to be half of the United States hate him and the other half adore him. And you can see the vast difference. I mean, the Washington Post, I've heard, the Washington Post has counted what they say is every single lie Mr. Trump has told. Now, we know the people who adore Mr. Trump, every word he says, as far as they're concerned, is the absolute truth. You get my point, Annie. So that's really personal karma. Yeah. People who adore him the ones who love him and trust his words, they've got strong karmic history with him, such that when he talks, they will believe him. And the people who can't stand him, he must have been pretty heavy with those people. And when he talks, they don't believe a word he says. So there's personal karma between us. How come, for example, millions of people love the Dalai Lama? That's not accidental. Millions of people hate him as well, the communists. But that means we've got strong karmic connection, personal history with him, and he must have been gentle and kind with us. So as soon as we meet him again, we think he's gorgeous. That's very personal. You with me?
Right.
Makes sense?
Thank you, God.
Interesting concept.
Thank you. Well, I've been thinking about it for a whole week, and I didn't know how to phrase it last week.
There you go. So now does this answer? It makes sense if you think of it as a logical thing. We draw each other to each other.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. It's a very interesting point. Okay, people, what else?
Thank you.
Thanks, darling. Now 5 minutes.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, sweetheart.
It's hard for me to wrap my mind around how, given our limited perception, right? How the teaching of karma is helpful, especially when somebody is in the thick of suffering.
I understand, darling. I understand, darling. So first, it seems to me the first point is our limited perception, meaning we can't see the past and we can't see the future. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Right. We're not anywhere near clairvoyance or the.
Precisely.
development that we need, right?
That's a really good point, Tali. That's why for me, I tell you, okay, the way I explain that to myself, and I think this is very logical. Any body of knowledge, think about any body of knowledge, and this is my point, if it is a valid body of knowledge, that if it's so whether we're talking acupuncture, physics, music, or Buddhism, if it's a valid body of knowledge, I think this is a really important point, it has to be coherent first theoretically. It has to be, Tali. So when you're starting to learn music, physics, let's say, acupuncture. If it is valid, you hear about it first, but you don't know acupuncture, you don't know how to read people's pulses, but you have to know there is a theory there. You limited perception right now. You couldn't know how to read a person's pulse, but you know the theories are there. So then you start with the theories. And if you have confidence in those theories, they answer your questions. You don't know the truth of it yet. But if it's a coherent if it's a valid body of knowledge, it's got to be coherent theoretically first. And karma is exactly like that. So it's either a load of rubbish, which someone has made up, which means you'll never prove it to be true, or it is knowledge coming from Buddha's experience that is a direct expression of his own truth, and it's possible, all the techniques are there. So the only choice we have got, if we decide to follow karma, is to learn it theoretically, and it's got to be even coherent theoretically. Even theoretically, it should make sense. I think that's logical. Do you hear me, Tali?
Yeah, I do. Even if I accept it theoretically just based on my limited understanding, but even in this life, when when misfortune befalls somebody and they know that it is a result of their behavior that they engaged in, that you can see how that happened in your life.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily mitigate the suffering. To recognize
that's the point. But it eventually does, though, Tali. Okay. That's the point that all the lamas would say. Eventually, when you have this confidence in the theory of karma, genuine confidence as a valid explanation of why you've suffered, because you're working with this every day, it becomes a powerful antidote to your suffering when you really have confidence in it. So all I can tell you, this example, I'm sure I might have told it here before, when Richard Gere when I was in 2003, when I was running the prison project in San Francisco, and Richard Gere in New York had invited the Dalai Lama to come, and he invited 20 former prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of work spiritually in prison. It was a very moving experience. I was invited, 2 people who work with people in prison. So all these Americans, black and white and Puerto Rican and all the rest, who didn't have karma necessarily, but just did meditation or something. And he also invited 2 young Tibetan nuns. Now, this is my example. These young women, early 20s, they were sexually abused and tortured in prison for a couple of years. So they were explaining their experiences. Now, this is a thing for me very powerful. Because for them, like all in Tibetans and Asia, but for 4,000 years, karma has been the natural explanation of the universe. It's in the bones of their being, like materialism is in the bones of our being. So for us, karma is a brand new concept, and we squeeze it into our other views. But for them, it's just the default mode. It's something in their bones. They really do live according to it. So this was the reason they were able to bear that suffering. And so even when they gave their stories, it was clear they were not angry. So that means what anger is, the philosophy of anger is, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. But if you really got the view of karma and you integrate it every day and you do practice every day, you would not have that philosophy in your mind. And that's because you got the view of karma. So really having the view of karma lessens attachment, lessens self-pity, lessens anger. So therefore it mitigates your suffering. And in the end, they even said, there were tears, and one of them said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers because we know we must have harmed them in the past, and because we know they will suffer unbearably in the future. That is a view coming from the philosophical position of karma that clearly wasn't just intellectual for them. So that's what made them sane. That's what helped them. And I can even say from the bit that I've tried to do in my life, Tali, I'm not a saint. There's no question in my mind that the view of karma, which I find very powerful, this is no question been why I've lessened my anger, lessened my attachment, lessened my self-pity, because it's the way I it's the way I inform it's the way life is informed to me through this. And all the time but you got to practice it every day. And it absolutely eventually does have a powerful effect. Because in the end, Buddha says, everything we feel is based upon our interpretations in our mind, but they're very hidden to us.
Thank you very much.
Good, Tali. Thank you, darling. But it's hard work, Tali. It's really hard. It doesn't work in the beginning. It's like a joke, but in the end, like everything, when you fundamentally change your mind, it becomes real for you. Then it's profound effects. Because Buddha's saying everything we experience is because of our interpretations. So just that these interpretations are very deep in our mind. That's all. It's very interesting. I find it very interesting. Such a good question, Amazing, Tali. Time to go, people. Yeah. Any more? That'll do. Okay. Time to go. So people, I'm so happy. Thank you so much. Very kind, very kind, very kind. Happy to see you all. And I'll see you in 7 days, if not sooner. We've got something else, I think. I'm not sure. So we just think these words, just think, these words say, we'll just mean them if we can. Due to these merits. What that means is due to the virtuous seeds we have planted by listening to these teachings, by thinking about the meaning, by attempting to practice. It's so beneficial. It's so powerful, These seeds we planted. Maybe they're not go astray. I don't put the prayer away. I don't want the prayer. Just have the thoughts. It's better. I like the thoughts better. Think, we've sowed all these seeds, just listening, 2 hours. As many moments as there have been as many seeds we've planted. So that's marvelous, already marvelous. Let me think we're going to nourish these seeds by practicing as well as we can from this moment forward, according to our capacity. Be happy with ourselves, Do our best to be conscious, to watch our mind, to think about karma, these things as tools to help us deal with our suffering, deal with our happiness, and be able to benefit others. How amazing. And just do a little bit every day. And the second little aspiration is may bodhicitta, this amazing aspiration to be a benefit to others. May it grow and grow in the minds of all suffering beings. Jangchub, Semchog Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Yu Chig, Ke Panyam Pa Me Pa Yang Gong Ne Gong Du, Pelba Sho. That'll do. Thank you, darlings. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you very much, Rebecca, and everybody. All your questions. Much love, darlings. Thanks, sweethearts. Bye.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank you.